Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar with our partner Etter+Ramli. Last week, we introduced you to the managed service Etter+Ramli, and today we will go more into the details of how you can really get started with a managed success in your company. And my name is Maren Kraft from the marketing team of Alta Via. And before we start, and I hand over to our managing director, Peter von Zimmermann, some housekeeping rules for you. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the public chat here. And we have Q&A session at the end of the webinar to answer all your questions. And be aware that the webinar will be recorded and published on our YouTube channel. So thank you very much. And now I hand over to Peter. Peter.
Yeah, welcome also to this webinar from my side. I've been in the last webinar as well, where we talked about the idea of the managed service more in general. And I told you then, just to repeat a bit, I told you then that I've seen this issue with the sustainability of the ERP implementation since quite a while, as we are doing this for more than 15 years now, and have customers seeing coming and staying, coming and going. So I really understand the issue, and I found or learned this at the DORC event in November from Todd, that there is an answer, and that's why we started this cooperation. We talked about this last week, and Todd explained in I think quite straightforward how this works. And I'm looking at, if you are interested, the webinar is already on YouTube. And this time we go more into the question how to implement this, especially in the context of Germany, Europe. When you would like to start, what are I will hand over to Todd to start to talk about this, and then we discuss it. Todd,
great. Thanks, Peter. I really appreciate the introduction. I'm going to share up. We got a few slides here to help talk things along. So the topic remains the same. We're just doing the continuation of this, which is really the how does this move from being an idea to being something more? Just to refresh, we've got a pretty. I think it's a fairly unique view. It's a simple view, but the true role of the NetSuite administrator is to maximize a firm's utilization of the software. And we think the extension of that is to facilitate a strategic information asset. That's really what we hold as the core. In order to get there, there are really three core tasks, being making sure users are good, then automating those processes, and then running checks on the processes and the data to ensure compliance and integrity. If we've got all those things, all those plates spinning properly, then we can really start to talk about business partnering and working toward what happens next. So what this does, again, this is a bit of a refresh, but at the elements of what we're trying to do, there's really four major drivers here for what managing success looks like. You've got to have an element of governance and procedure. You need to break those improvements down into bite-sized chunks. Then we have to have an eye on data to ensure we've got good data coming through the system and good outcomes. And then lastly, we talk about KPIs to measure the progress and the performance. The blocking issue in all this is really organization. It's really the key, and it's the major issue to address. Sorry, it's the major outcome to address the core inputs of a changing user landscape, a changing stakeholder landscape, and a changing business needs, and bringing that all together. This is a simple diagram which we talk about around what it all looks like. It's a combination of a managed success with a customer success focus. That's why we call it that. Okay, so now we're into the nuts and bolts of it all. So how managed success works. So firstly, everybody needs to go through an onboarding stage. We use this term first 90 days as our client onboarding. Our key objective here is to learn and plan. The inside of this period, we're assigning the success team to the customer. The success team includes a dedicated functional person, a developer resource, as well as a leadership resource as well. So that project team is coming together. We're going to deal with any upcoming issues that are caused by the user base, so we're immediately going to get started talking with users. At the same time, we're going to be starting to build the document library. The success plan is a document. That document holds really what the key elements of what we're trying to do, the stakeholders, the priorities, and the quality standards and whatnot. And then the design document is something which takes a snapshot of the current configuration. So really, once that's done, we call the 90 days finished. It normally takes about 90 days. You can't learn faster than you learn on these things, unfortunately. Once that's done, there is a sign off, and then we move into long-term execution. We run this in 90-day sprints, whereby we are dealing with user issues all the time, but we're also working on those productivity improvements to help clean up the way the system works. And after a period of time, we then start to put in place the data and process compliance checks. So that doesn't necessarily happen straight away, because we need to make sure we've got good quality stuff, and quite frankly, there are other pressing issues normally. So let's deal with the main elements of managed success. So the first one is the resource mix. This is the success team. It does involve three primary skill sets: the functional, the technical, and the leadership. Through this project team, Alta Via will be providing the leadership component. One of the consultants that are familiar with your account will get assigned them, and then we'll be assigning functional people that, quite frankly, are probably accountants. They're definitely heavy NetSuite experience on the functional side, to be the go-to person. And then a technical resource will predominantly start to come in to the engagement as technical needs come up, script reviews and whatnot. So the next point talks about the success plan. So what the success plan is, like I said, it's a living document. We update it every quarter. Some customers prefer every half, but it incorporates a couple of key elements. We're incorporating a vision and a strategy and a purpose for what the system is. That sounds a bit highbrow, but what happens through the life cycle is that the customer's objectives change, and not necessarily everyone is aligned behind that. So we try and keep vision, mission, purpose, and strategy clearly on the face of what we're doing every day. We also just determine the parameters, the KPIs, the user feedback, and the process compliance standards. We put all of that inside of this as well. So from a parameters perspective, who are the stakeholders? What's their role in the process groups? From a KPIs perspective, how we measure performance. Most customers are the same, but some customers are different. When we measure user feedback, etc. The success plan also includes the improvements that are going to be made to the system to advance productivity and utilization. And so we measure them on a quarterly basis. Sometimes they take longer than a quarter if they're particularly large, but most things we find can be done inside of a quarter, and they really get channeled through as sort of special projects, if you like. So that's the key elements of the success plan. The third part of managed success is the administrative discipline. This really speaks to the work that gets done. It's a little bit in the weeds, but when you're running systems, there's a number of things that are really important to keep in mind. The first one is, of course, change control. When systems change, they need to change for a reason. There's a release cycle around that. We don't create too much formality in this, but we certainly want to keep structure in the way change occurs. so change control is important. The second part of this talks about the solution design. Now, this is tightly aligned with the item below called peer review. So solution design and peer review are quite similar here. The solution design has got a particular hierarchy of endpoints that we use when designing a solution. And I think there's a slide later on about this, but we basically don't go immediately to scripting. We try and work with users first. We try and adjust processes and adjust the configuration. The peer review comes into this because peer review means that if we are going down a technical path, there's more than one person that's looking at it in order to determine if it's a good or a bad approach. So we get a more rounded view of the situation. Nobody works in isolation. The third point there is around documentation. In my experience, and Peter, I guess you've got some point of view on this. Everybody overlooks documentation as important, but it is probably the single most important part of good administrative discipline. And so, as part of our approach, we mandate documents at different stages of any change control part, and that's all part and parcel of what we do. They are somewhat repetitive, but they absolutely structure or include all of the elements that are necessary, so that the next person who has to review it has got something to look at and understand the context. Within the administrative discipline, we prioritize improvements. What this really means is that if we need to do something like an improvement that has a dependent, we do the dependent first. It sounds sort of trite or too simple, too straightforward, but we often come across customers that want to create e-commerce outcomes, but they haven't got a good data structure on their items to really allow that to occur. And so there's a dependable relationship there. The items need to be cleaned and tidied before we can move into an e-commerce environment. So we do try and prioritize and plan out the way those improvements are going to get released. I've spoken about peer review. Just to touch on it again, it always means that there's more than one set of eyes that are providing opinion and input into solutions that come out. The last thing we do are the user surveys. They don't always run quarterly. Sometimes they run annually, but we try and take stock of where the users are at in their life cycle, what their feeling is, what their responsiveness, and are they getting what they need from the system? So we have a 10-question survey around that that we like to circulate. So this talks about the solutioning process. It was the second point in there around solution design. So the orthodox solution just means that we step through a process that involves making sure that the easier option is not appropriate before we get to the more difficult and more complex. So changing process can be easier than training users. Training users can be easier than system configuration. System personalization really involves workflows, forms, roles, that kind of stuff. Customization goes into scripts, and then third-party tools if they solve that problem as well. So we work through this hierarchy, and at each stage, we just mark off why they're not relevant inside of that design process. So for document standards, when we're engaged, we've got really six main documents that we maintain and use as part of our delivery process. I mentioned the first two being the design document and the success plan. These are living documents. When a configuration changes, we update the design document because that's where we keep the decisions that were made around those configurations. It's really important. It's a very large document, typically into 200 or 300 pages. But thankfully, we only set it up once, and if it's well maintained, we never need to redo that big effort again. The success plan outlines what we do quarter to quarter, who the stakeholders are, and how we run the project or the engagement longer term. The quarterly reviews are really a meeting, and they summarize what we've worked on and what we want to work on. That really constitutes the key big documents. Then we get into more of the functional stuff. Out of our core system, clients get a weekly summary of all of the work that's taken place. That's a summary of the tickets and their various statuses. That's an automated report that comes out, typically sort of 2 or 3 pages. When we run an improvement, we also set up a mandate that is kind of like a mini project charter that we use to make sure that people have identified with the improvement and they understand their role in that improvement as well. We've had a number of cases where over the years people have just kind of not necessarily agreed after the fact. So we use this to help bring people together. The last thing in our document library is the functional requirements. This will outline anything that occurs with a script needs a functional requirement to explain what it's trying to do, how it works. They've probably got examples of the code inside of them as well. And this becomes the primary reference for any scripts that get done. Probably in all of this, it's the most important single document. Okay, Kim, the main thing here we're talking about is governance and management. Now, these are sort of best practices that have been learned over the years, and I've touched on them individually, but in summary, they look like this. In order to run the system effectively, you've got to have a vision for the system, a strategy, and a set of objectives. You need to break that system into different process groups, identify the stakeholders, and assign roles and responsibilities to those stakeholders as well. You need to work through the solution hierarchy so that you're building things in the simplest possible way, but with the broadest potential considerations. We have to be working to a quality standard, and in our FRDs and our success plans, we do mandate a quality standard. That sets expectations and provides governance around how the work is done. We set up and maintain that document library, which I've spoken about, which is particularly important, and those documents are of course referenceable with all clients. We have an internal ticketing system which works very well and provides summary reports out to customers on a scheduled basis. The last thing, which is probably the most interesting from my perspective, is measuring KPIs, setting KPIs to measure performance, and then a task to regularly assess them as well. So some of the KPIs that we like to use really break down these components of money, volume, and people, and they work in sort of different ways. So transactions per users, as that grows year to year or declines, you're able to assess whether the count of users and the productivity, which is the number of transactions they're processing, is improving or declining. It's a nice metric that's visible. We don't count all transactions. We break it down into what are called core transactions. That's in agreement with the client as well. Not everyone's got the same set, but we use that as a core base. The other thing we like to do is measure the total cost of license versus those transactions. This effectively provides us with a cost per transaction, which is an interesting management metric to understand the general cost of whether the system is providing a productivity improvement or not. We augment that with the total cost of ownership, which is the licenses plus any support or dedicated resources. It provides a similar number, but obviously with more resourcing inside of it. Licensing per user is an important one because that cost of license will likely go up over time, and so the relative cost of user on a individual basis really helps to understand the true nature of the inflation that's taking place. It's a system of users. It's not a system of modules, and so the cost of those per user is an important consideration. Total cost of ownership of user is the same thing, but just a bit more. Then we get down into cases or issues per user. This really talks about what we typically see when we first get engaged. The number's very high, and then it starts to come down as the users get stable and they know what's going on. But that's a good one to measure, and it really provides a good defining point throughout the process. User satisfaction. Depending on the customer, we do it annually, half yearly. Consider it really an NPS. Not everybody does this as well. Some people say no, it's fine, but we like to measure it to get an indication of what the NPS looks like. How willing are users really to refer things through. On to point number 8. So the transaction error rate, this is kind of an indication of not only process compliance, but also user skill. If there's a lot of reprocessing on transactions, it really indicates that users are obviously making errors, and that tends to highlight areas for training and whatnot. It also is a good area for us to test compliance against on a year-to-year basis as well. The last point, which is the process gates, this is a bit unique. What we do is we break NetSuite into all of its different process gates. A very simple one is that every invoice should have a sales order, should be created from a sales order, and then we test those processes on an annual basis for all the subsidiaries or the account, and then provide reference around that. Maybe the tolerance is 2%. But we test against that 2% to provide a sort of quasi internal audit type function. We found that to be very useful for not only identifying gaps in user knowledge, but also making sure that we're staying on top of clean data as a general objective as well. So now we get into what to expect on a daily basis. So what everyone can expect on a daily basis is that the functional resource that is assigned is available. They'll be connected to you by chat, by email, by phone, by however, and they're checking in typically on a day-to-day basis on who's doing what, where, who needs some help, etc. It's a very hands-on process, and what will end up happening is that relationship obviously grows around that contact. On a weekly basis, we run customer check-ins, and that's really the whole success team coming together just to talk about the progress that's getting made, who's doing what, etc. This will involve that your lead consultant from Alta Via. And typically that's where we share areas of risk or concern and deal with things that are sort of pressing across. The third thing that you can expect is that on a quarterly basis, we're checking in with all stakeholders and sponsors, really to evaluate performance and to define what the next productivity improvement will be for the team to focus on. Naturally, from time to time, there'll be some documents to review and some input into different design considerations as well. But overall, that's sort of what the activity log looks like. So there's a couple of videos we've got here, but I think I'd rather share this slide deck and let you play them by yourself, and really get an understanding of the different point of view. These are all terrific cases for what we do. In the bottom corner we have Courtney. Courtney is a NetSuite administrator. She was really underwater with tasks, just not getting things done. And so we provided her with the support she needed to really flourish, and that's been terrific for her. Stan's an IT guy. He runs the whole account, and he had all of his stakeholders constantly on how are we getting this done, resourcing and whatnot. So there's a collaboration through that. And then Samantha's actually was the COO of the business. She'd gone through implementation cycles with NetSuite. She knew the system very well. She knew what she wanted, but she never had the time to do it. So we provided her with an analyst that knew as much or more than Samantha. That gave her a huge level of confidence, and then they just got to work closing out all of the issues that were inside of the system. And through all of those relationships, they've all flourished as a result of our engagement, and they all well worth looking at. Okay, yeah, there we go. Peter, that brings me to the end of this. Now, I think, yeah, I mean, you would have seen a lot of examples over the years, Peter, where customers have done some of those things, but perhaps not all of them. But that's really how we move from the idea of engaging to how we actually do it. And this is the work that we do every day.
Great. Okay.
So, any specific points of view that you might have, Peter, on what
no, I think it's very. At least I of course I knew a bit of it already. So, but I think it's quite clear about how we are doing it. Which, of course, I don't know if we talked last time, but we should now at least on the commercial side of this, how to get this, how to get a customer getting this package. What packages do we have? This is a topic which we not discussed, I think, until now. It will become as a question. So
Right,
it is
right.
half FTE and full FTE, and so this is a commercial side, which of course we are. You do a great job, but you're not the charity department of the company, so there is obviously a commercial part to
Yeah.
such an engagement, which we of course have to talk. And I think it's from my perspective extremely reasonable. That's what price. So it's, but there is of course a price tag for this, and we have to talk about. That's for me one of the topics to discuss. Which is not yet discussed. Otherwise, I would let it to the people in this call. If there are questions on this, I would think they should ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to touch on that commercial front. Of course, if anyone is keen to pursue this conversation, then let's get together and talk through that. What Peter touched on is our resourcing model. The resourcing model that we use is what's called an FTE equivalent. And what we're saying inside of that is that, let's say our bronze plan, for example, is a 0.5 FTE. So inside of that, you're getting some, let's say 35% of the 50% is functional, maybe 10% is developer, and then 5 or so % of leadership. So that's how we break it down. These ratios have been worked out over quite a while and have really been tested. They're pretty good ratios. There's a question. Do we have a ticketing tool, and can customers get access to it? Yes, we do have a ticketing tool. It's a web tool that not only customers can access and input against, but we also summarize and send that out on a weekly basis as an automated report, which is typically used as the agenda for our weekly check-in meetings as well. Yep. Okay. Excellent. Any other questions in the chat? Okay.
If not, I really come back again to this package, this open FTE. It is, I think it's important for everybody to understand that there's a fixed price for this package, for this 0.5 FTE. So, and this is, I think, important to understand. I think that we have this fixed price and concept, and not something like what we normally doing as traditionally losing as a consulting company is very often time and material. So we're working on the case, and then settle the time material. In this case, and this I think is a big difference and important for everybody to understand. You have a package price, everything is included. Our service, the Alta Via service in terms of leadership, if we do this, as well as all of your services, is one fixed price for this 0.5 FTE. And it's very, so from the budget point of view, it is very plannable also. That's, I think, Todd, I think you have also something to say about this, because it's a big, it's important to do this, because otherwise we'll be talking about every minute to work on, because obviously the moment someone is talking with your team, clock is running, and they will stop talking to you in the moment. That's basic.
It's a really key. Peter, you raised the point, and I realized that slide was hidden, and I've just exposed it. So thank you. So there's four main pillars to what we do, and I think this is going to help to explain it. The first point is that we only work aftermarket, so we don't work implementations. What that means is, as a business, we've got a lot more ability to plan for the future, and do it in a way that we can keep the cost down, because we don't have these bursts of projects going up and down. It also keeps people focused, and it keeps them attentive to what's going on. We work on a dedicated resource relationship. So through this the engagement, particular people, named people, real people, get allocated to customers, and they get allocated on a dedicated basis. What that means is that one of our functional will typically run between 2 and 3 customers simultaneously, and they work for those 2 customers only. That tends to be, and so that's how that works. Some of the functionals are dedicated 100% to one customers. It all depends on the circumstances. The last thing is that we wrap this up into a single monthly fee that doesn't adjust for periods of high load or low load. It's a regular monthly fee. We've got regular access to people, and we're working through a regular work cycle. If the workload does become large or excessive, then we may have a discussion about changing that rate, because these contracts are all what's called resource limited. They are not time limited, because we do not charge by the hour. And that's an important part that distinguishes the business of Alta Via from Etter+Ramli. The last point is about collaboration, and so the fourth pillar is that we're not partnered with NetSuite. We've got no real need to be partnered with NetSuite. We maintain all of our professional standards and all of our professional certifications, and through it, relationships with the likes of Alta Via and other partners in the world, we get plenty of access to the new material. So that also means that we don't have to go and pay them extra money for stuff. So overall, it's really all of these pillars are built around the concept of lowering costs and improving quality, which I think everyone on this call will appreciate. There's a call in the chat that talks about the average price for services and the minimum engagement period. The minimum engagement period is 3 months. In that first onboarding period, it's a 3-month engagement. There is a sign-off at the end of that, and we do give you the option to cancel it with 30 days notice. So if you get to 60 days and you don't want to do it, then 90 days is done and we're finished. If we go over that 90 days and we sign off on it, then we automatically go into what's called our 90-day cancellation period. This basically gives us just enough time to close all of the open tasks. We don't open up new tasks during that close period, but it gives us enough time to close everything, organize the account properly, and transfer knowledge in an organized way. So that's the minimum engagement period and the notice period. The average monthly price So that's dependent on the resource mix, but we do break it into plans. Those plans are based around colors: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Our bronze program uses a 0.5 FTE, so half a full resource. Silver works as a 1 FTE, gold 1.5, and platinum 2. We do bespoke arrangements for bigger than that as well. We do cap the fee inside of each one of those. So a bronze is typically about 5,000 a month. And you're getting that full set of service inside of that. Silver, obviously more, not quite double, and gold, not quite double, not quite. Again, little bit of economics, but overall, that 0.5 FTE is typically good for customers between kind of very low numbers. Our smallest customer is 4 users, and that 0.5 FTE can typically go up to about 40 users. And then between 40 and around about 100, we start to get load that pushes us into silver, and then over 100 gold and whatnot. So there are clear demarcations. There's also exceptions into that. Some sites don't have a lot of users, but they've got a lot of subsidiaries and a lot of complexity. And then others have got very simple operations, very simple business, but quite a lot of users. So it's not we do need to size it, but that gives us a framework.
Yeah, and we're talking about euros in our case. Just
in our case, yes.
Did
I say dollars? I didn't.
No, don't say anything. Just take a number, and it could be rupees, it could be Danish krona. So whatever.
Thank you, Peter.
It is obviously something like dollars or whatever. The Swiss francs, euros, which is in the same range, but that should be clear.
We are talking about euros, yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you. Okay. All right, terrific. So what we'll do, I'll circulate this slide deck back to the participants, so that you can watch those customer testimonies. They're also available on our YouTube channel as well. Other than that, Peter, I think. Thank you.
We're done. That's good. Yeah. If there are no more questions, I would. Terrific. I think we hopefully we explained everything. Of course, videos will be around, both of them. It could probably a good idea to see them in the first one from last week, then this one, to fully understand the concepts. And I would also again ask everybody who is interested to just talk with us about how to move forward, or if there are questions to come up and how we can help you. I think it's a unique opportunity, and just use it. That's
terrific.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time, Peter. Thanks for your time, everybody.